So a lot of the conversation in recent days has only been about pitches. Everyone is an expert. We're going to try and help you be an expert, certainly on turners, because that seems to be a huge point of debate these days. Sanjay Manjrekar, in cricket, not just Indian cricket, but cricket around the world, you've had your say. You've grown up. You've slept overnight, perhaps, on turners across the country. We're going to try and break this conversation down into helping our viewers understand better how Indian pitches that are considered to be turners and almost with a negative connotation to that, to understand them better, to understand the challenges for batsmen, and to also understand how we as viewers tend to perceive these sorts of surfaces. So, welcome, Sanjay. Let's start by having this discussion. Why the need for this discussion arises. Why do we need to understand turners better? Do you think there is a misconception on how we look at turning pitches in the world, especially in India?
You're right, actually, to begin with by saying that I'm an expert of returning pitches because interestingly, I made my Ranji Trophy debut on a rank turner in Haryana because they had two, spinning stalwarts, the legendary great Rajinder Goyal and Sarkar Talwar, and that was my debut Ranji game, and the highest score in the match was around 54 or something like that. So yes, I had a very close relationship with turners. But I guess over a period of time, because of basically the noise around matches, that's all got amplified. There are more platforms. The voice of the fans is heard more these days than before. There are a lot of experts on various platforms. So there is a certain kind of message that everyone gets after every match. And I guess we are getting varied kind of opinions on turners and particularly the turner in the pink ball test match. So I guess uh, since the mid 80s, because I've been very closely involved with Indian cricket, maybe you could just talk about turners from that period till now, I guess.
Okay, so let's talk about it then. When we talk about pitches, like there was a conversation in Ahmedabad in the third test, there was a conversation in Chennai after the second test, and it all seemed to suggest turners in a negative sense that the batsmen don't stand much of a chance. It's an unfair advantage to spinners. Even spinners like Ashwin are then, there are comments from cricketers of previous generations like Yuvraj Singh saying, oh, look at what would have happened had players in the 80s or 90s had those sorts of turners. So suddenly we are having a conversation which is generational or from a period to period. Have pitches changed so much in what you've seen? Turners that are far more assisting spinners today versus what they were 10 years back, 20 years back?
Let me talk about what I know. I have no idea about how exactly the pitches were in the 70s and the 60s when when our great spinners bowled on Indian pitches. But then you also have evidence of Vivian Richards getting 170 on an Indian turner. So you would assume maybe it's not. Maybe those pitches weren't as difficult to bat on. But from the 90s, there have been pitches, and I was part of that team where Mohammad Azharuddin was the captain, Wadekar was the coach, and we had turners in that period. And India played three spinners: we had Anil Kumble, Venkatpati Raju, Rajesh Chauhan. But that was a period when Indian batsmen were getting big scores on the board, and the foreign teams struggled on those turning pitches. So clearly, pitches were made to suit the cause of the home team because Indian batting wasn't that great against pace and bounce. But it was a case of those pitches being Indian turners. Now we are increasingly seeing a debate about turners that give batsmen no chance at all.
Hmm.
So I think that I guess has changed. Even in that period, if you remember the Hirwani Test match, 16 wickets when Hirwani bowled. I mean, it was very difficult for the batsmen, but Kapil Dev got 100 in the first innings. So
Hmm.
it was a turner by day 4 and 5, and West Indies struggled. Hirwani got 16 wickets. He struggled to get a total of 16 in the series overseas. So clearly there was home advantage. But that's just advantage. I don't believe, Ronak, in fair and unfair pitches because once you have conditions that are same for both sides, it's fair and unfair for both sides.
Which would then perhaps indicate that it is still unfair for both teams. The conditions don't remain the same, or is that a nuance of Test cricket you're willing to accept?
That's the toss factor now. And
Okay.
I've always believed that in this sport, this is perhaps the only sport where a spin of the coin gives you such a huge advantage. I'm not saying it happens as much in our conditions, because a good team tends to come back because the pitch continues to aid spinners. But on green tops, I mean, Lords was a great example, and there have been many matches where toss became crucial. You won the toss and you won the game. So, spin of the coin to decide such a huge advantage is something that I've always believed that one must look at. And I have a suggestion and an idea to just neutralize that advantage, but that's for another day.
No, tell us now. Come on. We have time.
So if it's a 3-match series, just to even out the contest between two teams, you have a toss for the first game. The team winning the toss, or rather winning the game, forsakes the advantage of calling first for the second game, just to give the losing team the advantage for the second match. Just to even out, because what you want as cricket fans and for the long-term health of the game is that you have an even contest between bat and ball and between two teams. So if you have a team that has won the toss or maybe just won the game, the team that has lost just gets a little advantage to come back into the series. So they get the option of calling first as to what they want to do. So no toss. So less work for the commentators as well to go there and do those tosses and interviews too.
Okay, fair enough. I'm going to actually talk about pitch preparation in a second now, because we've spoken of the intent of making pitches and the fact that this is so. It seems to be such a hard job. There's always chatter, no matter what. It could very well be an honest mistake from a curator, and yet, we have hours and hours of conversation of the surface after. But just before that, since we're on this subject, is it an oversimplification from a viewer, from a non-player, a layperson who's watching the game to say, if the pitch reduces the toss advantage, it's a good pitch? I mean, it's good for viewership. It's good for competition, for contest. Even if it's giving you the odd ball that's jumping and turning, or, what you mentioned, simply reducing the toss factor, as perhaps, say, Chennai in the second test did, or, for some degree, you could even say Ahmedabad, even though Virat Kohli said there was an advantage batting first in the toss. I mean, that's his opinion. But just your thoughts on whether a pitch, if it reduces the toss advantage, is a good pitch, even if it has these characteristics of breaking up on the first day.
Don't take my opinion for it. Just because I played the game and I'm supposed to be this expert. When I say that I don't think toss really, is such a huge advantage, and a pitch should be prepared in such a way that team losing the toss also has an equal chance. I mean, those are the uncontrollables. I have a problem with toss per se. But you just go back, as I mentioned earlier, there was that Mahendra Singh Dhoni era where, the opposition kept winning toss. I mean, there are numerous games. I just had a look at those numbers. And in fact, Virat Kohli as well has a great record of losing tosses and winning games. Dhoni has a slightly better record. So those pitches were quite similar, and these pitches are perhaps a little more dry and more crumbly than those pitches. But when we went out there, had a look at the pitch, we knew this match is not going to last 5 days. Against South Africa, when India played South Africa with that final match in Firozshah Kotla, when Ajinkya Rahane got 202 matches, those pitches were all turners, and we knew that the match is not going to go 5 days. But India managed to win those matches. So sometimes, the result gets the whole sort of message coming out. The story just changes because of the result. Virat Kohli saying that England had an advantage when they won the toss in the pink ball match. If, again, I want to throw facts at you and numbers at you, I've got some interesting numbers from Cricket, for the best place to get these numbers. England batted entirely in that period from start of the day's play till the twilight period when the sun was out. And we all watched the game and we saw that was the most difficult period to bat on because the pitch was dry and the ball was gripping. Even if it was new, it was gripping, turning, going straight. The lacquer on the ball made it even harder because the ball remained hard, skidded off the pitch. Akshar Patel was playing 90 kilometers per hour. But that was the difficult period to counter. The slightly easier period was, once the lights came on and nightfall happened. So when you look at when England batted, they won the toss, but unfortunately batted in that what I call the notorious time zone. They batted entirely in that period. India batted 20.2 overs in that period in the second day and scored 46 for 7 in that notorious period. And there were some lower order wickets there. So what is interesting about day and night matches, Ronak, is also the time when you bat. And although England won the toss, they batted, as we eventually found out, in that time when the spinners really ruled the roost, and which was the afternoon period, 2:30 till about twilight, 6:30. and post 6:30 p.m. was the slightly easier period. So unfortunately, England was caught there. That is not to say that England is as good a team on those kind of pitches versus India. I think India has an advantage. If for similar pitches created for 5 matches, India will win that series because they have better spinners. Batting, you never know if Stokes and Root get going. They might just neutralize that advantage. But with Akshar Patel and Ravichandran Ashwin versus Leach and Moeen Ali and the off spinner Bess, I think that's where England pale in comparison.
You are absolutely fine with the home team is entitled to a home advantage. No problem with that in Test cricket.
Absolutely. And I'll quickly give you an example of how good the Mumbai Ranji team was when they were at the top. Because when we toured, as I said, my debut game in Haryana, they knew Mumbai didn't have a great spin attack. So they dished out a landmine to suit their spinners who were prolific. I mean, they were brilliant spinners, but Mumbai still found a way to win the game. And that kept happening everywhere we went. We expected turners. Hyderabad, Mumbai, Arshad Ayub and Shivlal Yadav. Turning pace. There were bouncers bowled by Arshad Ayub. Tendulkar was playing that match. Mumbai found a way to win that game. We never complained about the advantage that the state team was, getting by dishing out the pitch. So I don't believe in fairness, unfair home, overseas advantage. I'm only concerned because we must consider Test cricket as a very sacred product because not something that has just erupted 25, 30 years back. It's got a history, and there has to be an obligation for everyone involved to have a certain quality attached to it, because this is not so much about entertainment, just entertainment or money, because it's not making money anymore. It's like a heritage structure that we've got to respect. And if you have certain conditions, like you've got to have decent accommodation, decent dressing rooms, good facilities for fans to sit in, the outfield has to be a certain standard, the pitch as well has to be of certain standard.